The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this? Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Lots of things in the news this week. There's, of course, the perennial questions of the Affordable Care Act, which the Republicans call Obamacare. Actually, now President Obama does too. But does the rollout of the website being not so great mean that the entire program is bad? I want to make that distinction. Also want to talk about the filibuster, because the filibuster ended last week, at least with respect to most presidential nominees. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, we're going to talk about it. Number 3, the Iran deal. A lot of things happened last weekend. And the Iran deal, of course, was what caused the President of the United States to show up at 10:45, I think, on a Saturday night. Not very often. What does this deal mean? It's an interim deal. What does it mean for the future? Will it stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons? And finally, there's immigration. The immigration law has been bottled up in Congress for a couple of years now. Where do we go from here? What should be the role of allowing undocumented immigrants to the United States to get citizenship, to work here, or should they all be deported? I'm going to ask these questions to my guest. His name is Matthew Walder. He is an assistant editor with the American Spectator magazine. Matthew, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Hi, Mark. Thanks to have you.
Thanks for coming. So let's talk about the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. That seems to be the thing the right wing is having a field day on. Everyone is excited. The website failed. Does the website failing mean the program is failing, or is this a little too early for all this excitement?
No, look, I agree with you that there's an important distinction that can be made there between the technical failure of a website and the efficacy of the law one way or the other. To me, actually, the more interesting issue is the fact that the shutdown now, this doomed quixotic strategy that was going to cost Republicans the election in 2014 doesn't seem to matter very much. You know, whether or not the disastrous rollout of the website is a referendum on Obamacare in total maybe is an open question. But
it seems to be a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Basically, Republicans make every American unhappy with them with the shutdown of the government.
Yeah.
Democrats get everyone happy with them with the bad website. But I got to tell you, Republicans still have their chance because January is coming up, and the budget deal only lasts till January. They can shut down the government again and yet earn America's greatest hatred. It's kind of like a quiz show, right? Congressional level went to 9%, but it can go to 4%. There are levels below 9%. How about it? Do you think, it's sort of off our topic, but I'm going to ask you since you brought it up, will they shut down the government again in January?
I mean, certainly I hope not. It's interesting because actually seeing the rollout of Obamacare, like I said, it's turned attention away maybe from the shutdown. You know, maybe for my first and only time in the right-wing commentariat, I was a member of the WET caucus. So when it came to the shutdown, you know, I'm saying, oh, this is going to be...
The WET caucus?
Yeah.
You mean like a prohibition? Is this,
WET,
the WET caucus?
WET like, you know, Mrs. T always called Ted Heath and sort of Tory paternalists, you know, Wets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
excuse me.
They were the Wets.
All this English Whig, maybe that's very common at the American Spectator, right?
Yeah, you know, we have a strong Anglophile tradition at the American Spectator.
See, who knew? William F. Buckley is not dead. He is alive today at the American Spectator. But so meaning that you were against the shutdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
For political reasons,
For political reasons, exactly. I didn't think that this was savvy. I thought that it was a strategy that was, you know, bound to fail. Now I see, you know, what disaster Obamacare has been, and I think, oh, maybe this wasn't so bad. Maybe it was a minor misstep, but it's not going to cost us anything. The third wave here, though, is I look ahead to January, and I think, oh God, what's going to happen?
Republicans can put their foot in their mouth yet again. You know, every time you think that one party can't make it worse, they seem to always do that. But here's my question, though. If you look at during the shutdown, right before the website came out, a majority of the American people supported the Affordable Care Act. In fact, it went up during the shutdown. It actually went up to as high as 57%. All right, website rollout, everyone agrees, including the president. It didn't go very well. In fact, a recent report in the Washington Post said that the people on the website, CGI, actually told the executive branch it was going well. So I hope they are not only fired but sued for fraud, because I think they harmed a lot of people. But this too shall pass. It is temporary. I know from my own personal experience, no, I couldn't get on the website October 1st. I couldn't get on the website October 8th. However, since October 22nd, I've pretty much been able to get into the website regularly. I realize it's not 100% there, but we're getting there. And given that the deadline isn't until December 23rd to sign up for January, and it isn't until March 31st to sign up at all, isn't this also a temporary high for the Republicans, a temporary low for the Democrats? And as the website starts to work, people will focus on the actual policy and not so much the technicalities here.
Maybe. I mean, the thing that always puzzles me here is why people on the left are so eager to defend Obamacare. I mean,
let's talk about that.
I mean, it seems to me like this is this is a no-brainer. That this is the biggest, carve out for the insurance companies that you can imagine. Guaranteeing them a market.
No, it's a fair point, and I should tell you that I, like many progressives, attacked it from the left when it first came out. But we attacked it not for being that's lots of negatives. Not for being not a step forward. We attacked it for not being universal care. We attacked it for not being what we have in Europe and Japan and Canada, where everyone's covered. You don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to go through insurance companies, or at least having a public option. But I do think, and I think most progressives do think, it's better than the system we had before. And I guess when we argue about it with conservatives, again, yeah, sure, I prefer universal care. I prefer a public option. That's easy. But is the system we had before, where people with pre-existing conditions were denied coverage, where if a kid got hit by a car, they don't have insurance, they'd be shipped off to a public hospital and might well die in the process. Is that the system that you folks prefer? Because I haven't heard the Republicans articulate an alternative thing other than the prior status quo.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you here, and I think that even folks in the party who have been most vocal about it have mostly talked about cutting this, trimming this, adjusting that.
In your view, did the system before Obamacare work well?
Oh no,
okay.
Absolutely not. I think that what most people on the right are going to tell you is that rather than have this middle of the road solution where the government covers some people are covered by their employers, some people by their own plans, probably a few people somehow scrape by, especially say undocumented workers under no plan. Essentially,
right.
What they would say is
50 million Americans have no coverage whatsoever.
What they would say is that they want to get government out of healthcare altogether.
What is the conservative solution?
Oh yeah, what they would
plan?
say is that they would like to go back to a system where people pay out of pocket for general maladies, probably a system where people have relatively high deductibles for really catastrophic things. It's hard for me to see this working because the way that people, I don't think many elected officials, but probably policy people on the right, what they would say is that they would do this in tandem with just phasing out Medicare. I don't see that.
Popular government
which is a very popular government program. I mean, that's what you always see. People who say
94% of people on Medicare like their Medicare.
Oh yeah,
latest poll I've seen.
So you want to talk about being sort of Anglophile. I mean, one thing that I think is not being talked about aloud right now, but something that is turning around in a lot of people's heads is it possible for people of a conservative disposition to get on board with a single-payer system?
Is it?
Bill, because...
Is it? Because that's the first I've heard of it, and it's music to my ears.
Oh yeah, because you just think about this, right? So for a long time, people on the right have chided progressives for not thinking about history or about social context and so on when they say, oh, why don't we be like Norway? Why don't we be like Sweden?
Well, these places, which isn't that different from us.
Yeah, and they say, but look, America has a particular history and certain, a set of circumstances and so on. Things are different here. We're so individualistic. We want to strike out on our own. On the other hand, you have this strain within conservatism right now that, for good or ill, is appealing to Edmund Burke, for example. And this is a kind of paternalistic, strand of conservatism that is really not all that free market, or if it is, it's more moderately so. And if you look back at the history of British conservatives in the 20th century, once the NHS was rolled out under the Labour government in 1845, even when the Conservatives returned to power in 1951, they did not try to roll it back or dismantle it.
Now, can you write about this in the American Spectator without being fired? I mean, it strikes me that what you're saying, which again is music to my ears, is so unorthodox for American conservatives. I mean, is there any prominent American conservative that has publicly taken this position?
There is. I can think of one fellow.
One name.
He's definitely not someone who's in the good graces of the left. Do you remember the National Review columnist John Derbyshire, who was fired maybe a year and a half ago?
I don't remember him.
He wrote something sort of insensitive about race after the Trayvon Martin thing. But he's an Englishman who became a naturalized citizen around 2002, and he essentially has made this argument.
What I find is that conservatives in England, conservatives in Canada, conservatives in France, conservatives in Australia, conservatives I have not heard in any of the 35 nations that have the single-payer system, universal health care, I haven't heard any significant complaint from anyone. The only one I ever hear complaining about it is Americans who tell us that Canadians have to wait so much time for health care. I don't hear Canadians complain about it. I hear Americans say Canadians are complaining about it.
Oh yeah, and a lot of talk about Margaret Thatcher this year. Mrs. T, as much as the left hated her both in Britain and abroad, never
wanted to touch the national health care system.
It never even occurred to her. And someone who is, even more hated on the left, the great right-wing parliamentarian Enoch Powell was actually Macmillan's Minister of Health and was really devoted to making the NHS efficient, cost-effective.
Has the American Spectator written anything from this perspective?
Oh, no.
Are we going to see an article from you soon, Matthew?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I better. It'd be better to pitch it to the Nation. No, I don't know.
Well, no, maybe so. Maybe we could jointly write one for both the Nation and the American Spectator. I'm glad to hear it, because while I do think Obamacare is preferable to the current system, I'd be the first to agree that universal health care is much better. The insurance company makes all this profit. The government doesn't make that profit. Medicare has 3% overhead. Most insurance companies have 20 to 25% overhead. In every one of the nations that has national health care, folks, they live longer than we do. At least a year, often 2 years, and every single one pays less than we do. I'm glad to reach across the aisle and find someone in agreement with me on this. If you want to call in, it's 888-488-MARK. Back after this.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or a family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Guest is Matthew Walther. He is an assistant editor for the American Spectator, talking about everything from Obamacare to filibuster to Iran to immigration. Lots to talk about. If you want to join in the conversation, you can do so. Just pick up the phone and dial toll-free 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275, or you can also dial locally 571-749-1166. So Matthew, prior to the break, you dropped what seemed to be a bombshell to me, but one that very much pleases me, particularly at a time when almost nothing's occurring in Washington. I mean, let's face it, the partisan battles are as severe as I've ever seen them in my lifetime, or maybe in 100 years, I don't know. But the idea that conservatives could warm to universal care, look, liberals would love, you want it cost conscious, of course. You want it practical, of course. You want to make sure that you're getting bang for your buck, of course. But the current system whereby doctors are paid by the procedure and not by whether they take care of patients is, I think, a really bad incentive. It encourages unnecessary tests. And I think that, as you say, in England, the conservatives have accepted it. Is this something that you think has weight that could actually go somewhere, or is this still something that think tanks and intellectuals talk about that may not ever reach the public?
Well, I think that probably the greatest obstacle here is that the people who would be least likely to get behind it at this point, I think, are the grassroots. Next would be, working prominent politicians on the Hill.
This is mostly the thinkers,
the
intellectuals.
Yeah.
And what brings you to this conclusion? Is it just looking at actual data from these other countries, or the fact that really any other alternative is worse? As Winston Churchill once famously said, one of my favorite quotes, that democracy is the worst political system in the world except for all the others. Maybe that's this case. Universal care is the best of a lot of evils.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think... for the most part, you just look and say, we're spending way more money than all these other countries that do have a single payer system. The quality of the care by certain metrics is worse. We have this the perverse set of moral incentives that we're creating, by basically carving out a permanent market for these insurance barons, and we know what nice people they are. All we have to look at is, how a lot of them were behaving, before the Affordable Care Act was passed.
That's true.
Do we want to help out these people forever? I mean, to me, opposing the system that we have and opposing Obamacare, both of those make sense, for the same reasons that a lot of conservatives oppose TARP, for example. Do we want
a bailout to a public? Better to have the government do it than a bailout to certain private interests rather than other private interests.
Yeah. So I think that it's not so much, ideology or principle that swings some people in this direction. It's just a recognition that nothing else is likely to work. Even if some of us think that it would be better if, country doctors, made modest, had fairly modest incomes from, treating the people in the community, in their communities, letting people pay what they could when they could, and so on, the way that medicine worked here and everywhere else in the world. 100 years ago, but for all of human history up to that point, as much as a lot of us would like to go back to that, it just seems unlikely at this point. We've got universal suffrage, and we're not going to vote. People are not going to vote for politicians who want to get rid of Medicare. It's that simple. So we better move to something.
One of the proposals, and we're going to get to the discussion about the filibuster soon, but one of the proposals that actually had majority support in the House and the Senate, it just only had 55 votes in the Senate. It didn't have the 60 that Obamacare finally got. Was the idea of simply expanding Medicare for all. Their proposal at the time was actually to take Medicare down from 65 to 55. Mm-hmm. I have a more radical idea. We have a system, it's called Medicare. It's already there. It's not like designing a new website. It already exists. All the mechanisms are in place. Doctors know how to handle Medicare. Hospitals know how to handle Medicare. It's been around for 50 years. And the benefit is, if 55-year-olds are less likely to get sick than 65-year-olds, which they are, 45-year-olds are even less likely to get sick, 35 and 25-year-olds are even more healthy. If we simply had Medicare for all, just one Medicare system for all. You can even scrap Medicaid, have Medicare for all. And obviously the 25-year-olds, 35s, 45-year-olds would have to pay a premium, of course, but they're less likely to get sick. It might actually lead to the fiscal sustainability of Medicare, which I know conservatives worry about, and actually obviously it would become single payer. But it's a way to do it within mechanisms that we already have, so it wouldn't seem so strange and foreign to Americans. What's your view?
So I see the appeal of it. I guess what worries me is that I look at Medicare right now and I see something that could be a lot more cost effective were it not for the massive bureaucracy and all the unnecessary paperwork that goes along with it. And I think that if we were going to expand it for all, we would need to do away with a lot of that. And this is where the idea men have to give away to more practical thinkers as far as how you'd go about doing that. But I think that is really important because one of the most expensive things about Medicare is simply what goes into administering it. And I think that there are a lot.
Administrative costs are only 3% of the entire cost of Medicare, whereas for insurance companies, it's at least 15%, and I've seen some studies show it as high as 25%. So 3% is 3%, and we don't want to pay the extra 3%, but and I'm all for getting rid of paperwork if we can, but and let's put it all on computers and so forth. But it does seem to me that administratively, Medicare is a bargain compared at least to private insurance.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you see different numbers that sounds more like an Ezra Klein number. I'm sure that, if I asked Ramesh Ponaru, he would give me something at least in the double digits. But I think
you'll have to show me those figures. Because I've never seen it in the double digits for Medicare. I mean, we may argue 5%.
Yeah.
But no one disputes this point, that it's cheaper under Medicare than under private insurance. And we can argue about where the numbers exactly lie. But no, I'm glad to hear that. I'd love to see some. If you want to write an article with me that we can jointly publish in The Nation and the American. I've never published in the American Spectator. You'll have to let me know. Let me move on to the question of the filibuster, because the filibuster, I think, typifies the most partisan disagreements we've seen in a long time in the United States Congress. We're not quite at the point where one senator's caning another as they did prior to the Civil War, but we're close. I mean, we haven't, other than violence, the rhetoric is severe and the failure to cooperate is severe. And I think that the end of the filibuster is really more an effect of it than a cause of it, though obviously these things go on for a while. Let me talk in general about the filibuster, and then we'll get to the specifics of what happened last week. So in general, the filibuster, of course, is not found in the United States Constitution. You can flip through this document all you want. You will not see the filibuster. All you will see is that the Senate and the House each have the ability to set their own rules. That's all the Constitution says on this issue. Some people think it's constitutional. It, of course, is not. The Senate, and there's a longer story here, but I know you like history, that the original Senate did have a way to cut off debate and have majority vote in 1789. Then in about 1806, they decided, you know what, there's only like 30 senators, let's let everybody say their piece, and we don't need this rule. And for about 100 years, it was almost never used. Maybe once, or maybe I think 4 times in the whole 19th century it was used. It started to come up again more frequently around World War I. 1917, they restricted the filibuster to 2/3. 1975 to 60 votes. But should the Senate not rule by majority rule? I mean, we already have things in the Constitution. Treaties have to have 2/3. Constitutional amendments have to have 2/3. Overriding the president has to have 2/3. The Constitution specifies a supermajority rule in specific cases. Doesn't say anything about ordinary legislation. Should we, in general, even have a filibuster?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see what the good case to be made against it is. Parliamentary procedure changes over time, like anything else, and this is something that has been developed, largely in practice over the course of the 20th century. It's been put to good uses, bad uses. And the fact that we're curtailing it right now, I think, is neither here nor there. I don't think we've seen the last of the filibuster. I think the other important thing here too is that Republicans, as upset about this as they are right now, essentially wanted to do the same thing back in 2005.
Right.
When Democrats were doing basically the same thing to a lot of Bush's nominees.
Let me raise a distinction, though, because I do see a distinction between the two, and I admit back in 2005, I was the one saying we have to have the right to filibuster for these judges. So mea culpa, I was there. But I think there's a difference. Back in 2004, 2005, there were 3 specific judges that George Bush wanted to appoint to the Court of Appeals that Democrats opposed for specific reasons. One of them had said some things that were openly racist. And then Janice Rogers, I think, had compared labor laws to slavery. And these were people that Democrats considered way out of the American mainstream. They objected to these 3 individuals as judges. And actually, I have no problem with that. I think that if you have a lifetime appointment, there should be someone that gets 60 votes, because we don't want some. Judges are not supposed to be partisan. If there's anyone who shouldn't be partisan, it's the people who call the balls and strikes, who look at the Constitution, look at the law, and say this is what it means. I don't want a very partisan judge, so I'm actually okay with the 60 vote requirement for judges. But when the Republicans said, yeah, the candidates that Obama wants to appoint to the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, they're absolutely qualified. Ted Olson, the Republican, supports them, and one of them worked for Bush, under Bush, in the Solicitor General's office. They're fine. They're moderate. No one disputes their ideology. We just don't think that Obama should be able to appoint any judges to the District of Columbia because we like it the way it is with the majority of Republicans. To me, that went one step too far, because you're basically saying, sorry, Mr. President, you lost all your Article 3 power to appoint judges. And if they remained in that position, I'm not sure what choice Harry Reid had but to end the filibuster, even though I'm kind of sorry to see it go, particularly with regard to judges. What's your view?
I mean, I think that they're just doing whatever they can to oppose nominees with whom they agree on, if not necessarily partisan grounds, ideological grounds. I mean, look at how the Democrats treated, John Roberts and especially Samuel Alito back during the Bush years. I mean, they weren't filibustered.
It's okay to vote no. It's okay to vote no. I'm not knocking vote no on a judge, but a filibuster means not bringing it up for a vote.
To me, it's a rough game, and that's just how it's played. And they were playing it pretty effectively.
Well, they're playing rough, and then so Reid had to play rough back. But to me, this takes away some of the comedy that used to get laws through the Senate, if not the House. The House was always seen as the rough place where people are partisan, and the Senate was the place where you had to have some modicum of support from both sides. I do think Reid had to do what he had to do, but I'm kind of sorry about it, because as someone who respects sort of the ways things have been, maybe that's a conservative sentiment in my mind, I think that the idea that for judges particularly, they have to get a certain 60 vote minimum, that made sense to me. All right, so we are going to talk next about the Iran deal. Lots of different views on this. The interesting thing about this is I've heard people who support it and who oppose it, both from liberals and from conservatives. What's your view? You want to call in? It's 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275, or 571-749-1166. Right back after this.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat, Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So,
here again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. So, we have a deal with Iran. What is in it? It's kind of hard to put together. We know that Israel and Saudi Arabia and Turkey seem to be very much opposed to it. But what actually does it do? Well, Iran does seem to be on a path to obtain nuclear weapons, but maybe not after this deal. The deal is a 6-month interim deal. And what it does is, first of all, it says to Iran they have to convert or dilute their 20% enriched weapons. You need about 90% to get a bomb. 20% enriched weapons. They can continue to enrich up to about 5%, and they have to stop this sort of new plutonium factory that they're building. Most importantly, they're going to be IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency monitors. This is the United Nations branch that I think everyone pretty much argues does a pretty good job. They're the ones who said, by the way, that there weren't weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but there were in Syria, and they've been pretty hard on Iran. They're going to be monitoring it every day. And the idea is this is an interim agreement. We're going to see 6 months down the line whether or not Iran can be trusted. And in return, Barack Obama, the United States, has released about $7 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but compared to the amount of sanctions still on Iran, it's a relative pittance. In fact, there's about $15 billion, twice that amount, that will be earned by Iran over the next 6 months that will be held in escrow to make sure that Iran goes one step further. The humorist Will Roberts has actually posted his own take on the agreement with Iran. Let me play that for you, and then I'll get a comment later from my guest, Matthew Walder. Oh, let's see here. Here we go.
Well, now it's official. Our government has invested time and money into a new project I like to call Nukes of Hazard. Yeah! A 6-month deal to curtail any nuclear ambitions that Iran may have. Now, I believe that our government has good intentions with this program. I really do. But I think maybe it should be more like an intervention, or maybe a rehab program, or a 12-step program.
Just one more fix. Come on.
Because I don't think that this nuclear drunk that Iran has been on for several years is going to be solved by giving him more money or taking away the keys to mom and dad's liquor cabinet. Remember Prohibition? It stopped all drinking and production of drink in public. But in private, bathtub gin, stills in every crooked basement. And based upon Iran's past dishonesty, bring in Elliot Ness and the inspectors. When I was a kid, I had a small problem with fire. Just matches. I'm okay now. Anyway, to this day, I still look at a flame and get mesmerized and kind of lose my train of thought. Anyway, see, the last thing we want is for Iran to kind of fall off the wagon, or even worse, load the wagon up with nukes and bring it to the nearest border. See, Iran, I don't know if you know this, but here in the US of A, we know sneaky.
This call is monitored for quality control.
We invented the phrase. So consider this 6-month deal the it takes one to know one deal. And even though our president is not really a cowboy, he sure does have an itchy trigger finger. I'm Will Roberts, and this is your weekly telegram. Well, now it's official. Our government has invested time and money.
All right. Well, I'm a big fan of Will Roberts. I actually disagree with him there, though. I think this is a good interim deal, and emphasis is on the word interim. What it does is it stops Iran from going where it would have gone if there were no deal. Let's face it, 20% doesn't sound like much, but anyone who studies nuclear weapons will tell you 20% is actually, the distance from 20 to 90 is smaller than the distance from 5 to 20, which doesn't sound right according to the math, but it is. I think that we had to do something to stop them while the deal's going into place, and I say we'll monitor them, and if they're peaceful, great, and if they're not, I'm ready for military action in 6 months. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to disappoint your viewers here, but pretty much I agree, including on the fact that we need to stress the word interim here. I think most reasonable people, for most reasonable people, the mood is, let's wait and see. This is a 6-month agreement. Really the only corner where you're seeing anything other than that is among, a certain hawkish element on the right that seems to think that it's always Munich 1938. You see a lot of these outrageous comparisons being made, but
Let me say this. I am glad the hawks are there. I am glad that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is complaining. I'm glad that the Saudi Arabians are complaining, the Turks are complaining, and I hope Congress does pass a bill for more sanctions in Iran that takes place if they cheat. I think we need a carrot and a stick, and I'm all for the stick, but we also need a carrot. And it seems to me that as long as we're ready to lower the boom if Iran cheats, and as long as we're monitoring, look, we did this with North Korea. Back in the 1990s, there was a deal with North Korea. We had nuclear inspectors in there. We monitored them, and during the 1990s, they did not develop a nuclear weapon. What happened? 2002 came around, George Bush invaded Iraq, took his eye off North Korea, they kicked the inspectors out, they developed nuclear power. We, I think, have to give a commitment that if Iran cheats or breaks this deal or kicks out the inspectors, they're going to get military action from us. I think we need to give that stick strong. That being said, if they cut the nuclear weapons out, then we shouldn't have the sanctions there. I mean, I don't like that they're supporting Hezbollah and terrorist groups and helping to massacre people in Syria. And frankly, we probably shouldn't lift all the sanctions because they're still doing bad stuff around the globe. But we have to give something for good behavior, and $7 billion strikes me as a relatively small amount. I'm actually glad we have this deal.
Yeah, I saw that today that David Ignatius heard from Henry Kissinger back in 2006 that Dr. Kissinger said that Iran needs to make up its mind. Does it want to be a nation or an idea? I think that what we're seeing right now, maybe, possibly, let's hope, is that Iran wants to be, a nation full of young people who are educated and secular, rather than, a sort of rogue state that sponsors terrorism and so on. And I think similarly, though, the United States also needs to decide whether it wants to be a state or an idea. Do we want to be the sort of hodgepodge of 300 million interesting people that we are, or do we want to be this sort of factory for promoting democracy abroad, at all costs? I think that in both cases, maybe it looks like Iran and the United States are deciding that they want to be nations rather than ideas.
Well, I would argue for the latter example, for the American ideal, that there's an in-between. Between the isolationism of, heck, even George Washington, that we only look out for our own measures. I think that's dangerous, frankly, to America as well as the world. To the idea that we have to be involved in every conflict around the globe. I mean, I think we have to look at each conflict individually. I've advocated that, frankly, we do a no-fly zone in Syria because I'm very concerned about the mass murder there. I would never advocate freeing Tibet as much as I love the Tibetan people, peaceful people being brutalized by China. We're not going to get in a war with China. So it's all about practicalities. I do, though, want to make the distinction that you started to make with regard to Iran, and which I think is far too little made in the press, and that is the distinction between the Iranian government and the Iranian people. When we say Iran, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a place on a map? No, a place on a map doesn't do anything. It's people that do things. And the Persian people happen to be the most pro-American people in the Middle East. They happen to be the most pro-Israel people in the Middle East. They are young, they are educated, they are moderate. Most of them very much love America. And of course, when the supreme leader, Khamenei, had the elections, 200 people ran, and he only allowed 6 to actually run for office. The 6 most right-wing conservative, maybe I shouldn't use those words. Let's just say fundamentalist Islamic people. But the people seem to have voted for the least radical of the 6. And so I always want to make the distinction, particularly after the Green Revolution, when the people rose up against their government and say that, I'm very pro-Iranian people. I do think that their government is, I don't know whether they're living in the Caliph age, but the point is that they're not representing what the people want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to go back to the Hawks for a minute, I think that the mistake that they make is they read a translation of Khomeini addressing an audience of like-minded fanatics and think that this is the mood of the Iranian people somehow, and
it clearly is not. And that's actually something I pointed out to Bill O'Reilly on his show. When he said something about Iran, and I said, let's make this distinction between the Iranian people. And he said, no, enough of them support the mullahs. And I said, well, I'm sure there's a minority of them that support the mullahs, just like there are a minority of South Africans that support apartheid. But that doesn't mean that's what the majority of the country wants. And we have to be careful, because if we have to take military action, it's very hard to persuade a people that we just hate your government. We don't hate you, and so hopefully we won't have to. And if we do, it would hopefully be a very, very selective strike that just pinpointed the nuclear and didn't harm any civilians, because we don't want a war with the Persian people. What we want is a government that respects international law.
Well, this is why it's so important that this interim agreement translate into something more long-term, because I think that it's going to be pretty much impossible to get the American people on board, even with a small strike. I mean, you want to talk about what's less popular than Congress intervening in Syria. Frankly, I don't think you would get it past Republicans in the House at this point. It would be close, but I think there would be a coup. I think that
because hawks in the Republican Party are the ones complaining about the Iran deal. And yet you're telling me, and I think you're right, that they don't have the stomach for military action.
Yeah.
So they're saying, this deal isn't strong enough, we need something stronger from Iran, but they wouldn't want to pull the trigger if they had to.
Oh yeah.
It's complete hypocrisy.
It's bluster. I mean, this is how the game is played. But yeah, when it comes down to it, I think that, if it were up to them, they would be pursuing something similar.
So the only way to really understand today's Republican Party is that anything President Obama wants or does is wrong, and that's it. I mean, Iran's the perfect example. Complaining the deal's not strong enough, and then if he had to take military action, they'd be against that too. Your magazine is of course, think tank. It's intellectuals. Do you highlight these contradictions within the Republican Party?
Well, I mean, you could do it all day long, and I think to suggest that this is somehow something you only see amongst the Republican Party.
Okay, fair enough. There are Democrats that hated Bush no matter what he did, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
that's fair.
Just consider the flip-flopping here. I mean, when I was in high school, I was, a bomb-throwing left-winger who hated the Bush administration.
Really?
And thought, yeah, this is great. We're going to stand up for civil liberties. We don't want this war. And now the same left-wingers support Obama, over the NSA in Syria and so on.
Well, let me say this. I have consistently opposed spying on the American people. I consistently bring out my Constitution, talk about the Fourth Amendment. I don't care whether Bush is doing it or Obama does it. That's why the opening of my clip, I said the government's spying on the American people. I did that during the Bush years. I keep it up during the Obama years. When we come back, we're going to talk about immigration.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com.
Here again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
The Inside Scoop, this is Mark Levine. If you want to call in, this is your last chance to do so. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275, or you can call 571-749-1166. My guest is Matthew Walther. He is the assistant editor at the American Spectator magazine. So, two topics I want to talk about in this last segment. One is immigration. The other is the name of the Washington team, football team, that I don't want to refer to as the Redskins because I think that name is offensive. I want to get to both those issues. Let's start, though, with immigration. So the liberal position on immigration is pretty clear. When it comes to certainly the children that came here with their parents crossed the border illegally. But the children, whether they be 2 or 5 or 10, didn't make the decision to come here. They came with their parents. The vast majority of them speak English. They don't know their native tongue often. This is the only country they've known. Deporting them would be a big mistake, and frankly, they're highly productive people. We should welcome them as citizens. What's your view?
Well, yeah, I don't think that there's anyone who's suggesting that we deport, 11 plus million people, or even...
How about self-deportation? That was Mitt Romney's idea.
Or voluntary repatriation. I think, let's just jump right into this. We actually have, in the last decade or so, down in Arizona, assisted over 100,000 people who decided, they couldn't find jobs or, weren't making enough money, or they just wanted to go back to their families again. We provided them with airfare and bus fare, and they went back to their hometowns in Mexico. And I think if the economic recovery is not as robust as the president would like it to be and the Democrats would like it to be, we're just going to see more willingness.
And certainly I'm not against anyone voluntarily moving anywhere. But, but for the people who want to stay, and the people that have lived here 10, 20, 30 years, shouldn't there be a path to citizenship?
Well, it depends, I think, in large part what that path looks like.
Well, let's say the current bill in the Senate. I think it's 12 years, 13 years, something like that. It's a passed bipartisan bill in the Senate, got through the filibuster. What do you think about the Senate bill?
Well, I think that even the president has walked away from the idea that we should have, a bill that's 162,000 words long that tries to handle every single issue that's even tenuously connected with immigration.
Comprehensive immigration reform, they're calling it. It's comprehensive.
Yeah, it's just silly when you think about it. What other issue could you approach this way? Could we have
healthcare, for example?
Well,
banking is another example. This is a complex issue. There's a lot of examples. There's a lot of people, a lot of issues, and how people came, and people come by boat, and people forget that they always talk about the Mexican border, but the majority of immigrants come here by plane. They don't even come here by crossing the border.
Yeah, but not the majority of those 11 plus million who are here illegally.
Some about half. I think you'll find maybe it's 40%, but a significant chunk do not come across the border. But in any case, what's your answer? If not 162,000 words, how would you do it in 100 words or less?
I think that we need to handle the various issues along the sort of immigration spectrum individually. The first one, and I think in some ways it's the easiest to address because actually we've made a lot of progress on this front, is border security. Would you agree that it shouldn't be anarchy along the border as it still is in some areas where people can come and go as they please?
I don't think that exists anymore.
Well,
I really don't.
I think that
maybe in Canada it does.
The figure that I last saw was we control about 56% of the southern border, according to our own metrics, is for what
when you
constitutes
say we control. Do people go across our border? Of course they do, but
without our knowledge, which, among other things, is a threat to national security.
See, I don't think it's that big a threat. I think the bigger threat would be from people who come here on planes. pace 9/11. But not just that. I mean, frankly, there are not many terrorists from Mexico. The people from Mexico are coming here for economic reasons. They want jobs. Are there some gun and drug runners? Yes, there are. There's also plenty of them in Arizona that don't need help from Mexico. And I'm all for deporting and incarcerating those who commit crimes. But the vast majority of people are coming here for economic reasons. And I think if it comes to security issues, I think, frankly, the people who come in our airports are more dangerous as a percentage of people who come in than people that come across our borders. I don't think a razor wire fence is going to keep out the terrorists.
So I think you talk about economic opportunity, and it's true. Although, as I suggested, as we continue to see this weak recovery, it seems less and less likely that people are going to be coming here. I think we have to look at the fact that workforce participation is, as low as it's been in the last 4 decades right now, that there are American citizens who are looking for work, especially blue-collar workers, the kind of people who are going to be getting these jobs that people coming from south of the border.
See, my answer is pay people minimum wage, raise the minimum wage, give them solid working conditions, and then they won't undercut American wages. But you know what? We have a caller on the line. I always want to give a chance for our callers to join us. Amanda from Herndon, welcome to the Inside Scoop. Are you there, Amanda?
Oh, yes. Hi. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I wanted to give a comment on behalf of myself and on behalf of my mother, who we're both Iranian and we both follow Iranian politics all the time, almost religiously. And we are so unhappy all the time with what people on the news, American media, say about Iran. And we just needed to say thank you so much for your comments. Thank you so much for doing your research and saying that we need to act separately with the Iranian government and the Iranian people.
Always
the Iranian
believe that.
people and the youth, they really like America.
I know, the Green Revolution showed it. And frankly, I was actually critical of President Obama for not being more supportive, not that we should have sent troops or anything, but at least being more verbally supportive of the Green Revolution, which was, Iran's chance, or they tried to overthrow their government.
Well, I think, in my personal opinion, I think it would have ended up being, it wouldn't have been revolutionary because it would have been under the same system, the same Islamic system, but it was a moment that showed that the Iranian people really want something different. And that, I agree with you, was a chance for the president to say and acknowledge that the people of Iran are very different from the government. And I think that's something that in America people need to realize about Iran, because they don't understand that the people of Iran want something very differently from the government. So we just wanted to say thank you so much for pointing that out.
My pleasure, and I know lots of Iranian people, and like I said, Persian people are great. I've just noticed there's a long, proud history there, and there's no reason why this. I mean, it's unfortunate, given we can all talk about the whole history between the United States and Iran and everything from the government we overthrew in the 50s to the Iranian hostage crisis and so forth. There's a long history there that happened many, many years ago. The vast majority of Iranian people, as you say, first of all, it's a very youthful population. It's an educated population. It's a pro-American population. The question I guess I have for you, Amanda, is there any possible way, and I don't know that we can do this as the great Satan, is there any possible way America can help the Iranian people take back their country from the mullahs? Is there any way we can help? Because I don't know that we can.
I think the biggest thing, and this is what I hear from a lot of Iranian bloggers and things within Iran that I hear, they just really want support, verbal support, if anything, just to acknowledge the Iranian people want something different and say, yes, we back you, we support you, we'll do what you need, we'll engage with the people, the ground movements. And I think that was a support that they didn't get in 2008,
I agree. I agree.
So I think that's the biggest thing the Iranian people have been saying that they want.
Well, you certainly have my support.
And to acknowledge one other thing, and to acknowledge the human rights abuses in Iran, to say, like, this isn't right. And I feel like that acknowledgement would make a big difference.
Well, you have my support, Amanda, and I thank you very much for calling in. And if you check out my history, you may be shocked to know that I was actually a host on Press TV for about 4 months until I tried to bring an Iranian dissident on the air, and they fired me. So I think you'll find that very interesting. Check out. My name's Mark Levine. There's a whole article about it. You'll find it on the web. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So I was really glad to hear that from Amanda, and to make that point between the Iranian people and the Iranian government. We only got about 4 minutes left, and we talked about this in the break. I want to talk about the Redskins. And I don't even like to say that on the air. And I believe the term is racist and it should be changed. And I want to make a distinction between Redskins and the Chiefs, the Indians, the Blackhawks. It's one thing to simply have a group of people. The Chiefs, the Chiefs were the head, right? The Blackhawks, the Indians. I mean, Notre Dame has the Fighting Irish, right? And I don't think any Irish people complain about that. I think it's different when you say Redskins. To me, if I had a team called the Blackskins or the Whiteskins or the Yellowskins, I think people would rightly find that offensive. You disagree?
Well, I think that for one thing, I mean, the argument that you're making that Redskin is offensive, whereas Blackhawk, Indian, Chief, so on, these aren't, is not the argument that maybe, other people who want to see the team's name changed, are making. So that's good. I still don't think that Redskin is racist, though, because if you look back at the history of the usage, you read, say, the frontier novels of someone like James Fenimore Cooper, you see Redskin used to denote someone who is brave and strong and masculine, all the things that were,
these are white terms for Native Americans. These are not their own chosen terms.
But so is Indian and so is Native American, by the way. This is
Indian actually Indian is a little bit inappropriate because after all, it came from Christopher Columbus thinking he was in India. So I mean, that's why I say Native American.
But how far do you want to take this? I mean, is Native American offensive? This is a construction, in the English language, which is not the indigenous language of Native tribes.
Native, I'm okay with Native American, but I'm also okay with Navajo, Sioux, calling the tribes by their proper names, by what they call themselves. Here's the thing, though. It clearly offends a significant number of people, not just Native Americans, but people like me. I'm offended by this. Teams change places and names all the time. It seems to me that, we could think of all kinds of names, call them the India. I could think of a whole bunch of names, call them the Chiefs, or you have to give a different name from someone else, and call them I don't know. I'll think of something. The Braves. That's a good name. Braves. They're brave. But it seems to me that this is a term that the Warriors, that's been used, that offends enough people and is really a vestige of a past that Native Americans didn't choose this name. White people chose this name. And why do we have to do this in a sporting event?
So 2 points here. One really quick. I think that at the end of the day, it's up to the ownership of the team to make this decision, and that there are more important things like civil liberties and NSA surveillance and so on that the left could be concentrating.
Oh, I focus on those too.
Concentrating its time on. But the other thing is...
we couldn't have a team with let's say we had a team with the N-word in it. That would go too far, right?
Yeah, I think so, but I mean...
I wouldn't ban it because of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But I believe in using social pressure and ostricism to persuade Dan Snyder to change the name. And so I like to refer to it as the Washington team. And I encourage everyone to do that until he changes the name.
I've just never met any Native Americans who are offended by it. I've never met one.
Really? I'll introduce you to some. I promise. Matthew, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I enjoyed the debate. If you want more information on the Inside Scoop, go to my website, marklevinetalk.com, and you'll see all my shows there. Thank you again, Matthew, for coming on the show. So that was pretty quick.